Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Hello, everyone. This is Drew Amoroso again, and thanks for joining us today for the Designing Your Remote Workday webinar. Appreciate the chance to spend some time with you today. We're going to go ahead and jump right in. Today's topic is on designing a home workspace. So quick reminder before we do get started that if for some reason we happen to get disconnected during the webinar, please stay in the room and we'll get it back up and running as fast as we can. So this is part 4 of our 6-part series that we're putting on. And again, the goal of this series is to provide you with some actionable ways that you can start to reshape what your workday looks like in an effort to adjust to what is probably going to be the new work reality for us for the foreseeable future. So after today's session, we have 2 more remaining topics coming up this week. And those 2 are time and task management, which we'll be covering on Wednesday. And then our final webinar in the series will be on Workday Wellness, and that will be this coming Friday. Okay, so our agenda for today, we're going to start by talking for just a few minutes about why it's important to exercise some intention behind how you define your workspace. And then in part 2, we're going to cover 4 simple concepts that you should take into account as you're thinking about how to design your space. And then we're going to finish, as we always do, by leaving you with some final thoughts. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have. If you do have a question, you can submit it by clicking on the button at the bottom of your screen that says Q&A. So you can just go ahead and type right into that box. If you want to ask a question anonymously, you can also do that as well by just checking the box that pops up on your screen. Okay. So right now, I want to do a quick poll just to get a sense of what the hardest part has been for all of you when it comes to creating a home workspace. So let me just go ahead and launch this poll. And I just want to take a temperature of where everyone is at on this. So the question here is, what's been the hardest part about creating a home workspace for you? So as you've been adapting to what it's been like to work from home, what has been the hardest part about sort of siphoning off and creating this home workspace for yourself? And the choices here are, first, the space I'm using wasn't designed for working from home, which I know a lot of us are struggling with right now. Number 2, there's not enough separation between the workspace and my home or personal spaces, right? So it can be very difficult when we're trying to block off a piece of our home to actually do work, to separate that out from other things that might be happening in our personal life. Sharing it with family members or other significant others. And then 4th, it's just not as comfortable as my non-work from home space. And what I mean by that is the space that you used to work in when you were not forced to work from home. I probably should have put a 5 on there, all of the above, because I know that many of you are struggling with a variation of all of these right now, but go ahead and pick one and let's go ahead and take a look at the results here in a second. Okay, while we're waiting on the poll results, let's start by talking about why it's such a challenge to create a home workspace right now. I think there are a lot of unique challenges here, but the main ones are that now that you may be exclusively working from home, you're probably surrounded by distractions and other limitations that you wouldn't normally face in a traditional workplace or your old workspace, right? It can be very difficult to set up well-defined boundaries, especially for those of us with small homes or apartments. So the type of workspace that you create is going to play a huge role in your ability to create separation from, on the one hand, your personal and home life, and on the other hand, a work environment where you can really be productive every day. And it'll also be a major contributor to your ability to work efficiently and effectively day to day. So when you're designing a home workspace, the first thing you want to do is define a specific space that you'll designate specifically for work and just for work only. There are lots of reasons why we should be intentional about actually outlining and creating a dedicated workspace that's separate from our personal space. And I want to lay a few of those out for you here. So first, when we take the time to define the space, it allows us to add this much needed level of structure to our workday. So if we don't have spaces that are dedicated exclusively to work, then we end up having a hard time defining a start time and an end time to our workday. So work blends into personal time and vice versa, which makes it really hard for us to be productive or get the time that we need away from work to recharge. Second, having a dedicated space helps you better control your environment. So one of the most difficult aspects of working from home right now is that most of our homes are not set up to be workspaces. And so we end up experiencing some sprawl in both directions. So having a workspace allows us some more control. And maybe it's not full control, but more control over our work environment. And that's going to help us better eliminate distractions and maintain our focus. And then third, taking the time to define your workspace is going to help you create some very tangible boundaries, which will in turn allow you to establish rules that will help you make the most of functioning in what probably is a very small space for many of you. So the more boundaries that you set up, the more productive and focused you're going to be. So those are some of the reasons why. Now, what's the how behind that? So step one in this process is to simply define a very specific space that you're going to designate for work. And by that, I mean creating literal boundaries around the space. So for example, the desk and the couch over in the corner, those are workspaces, but the chair on this side of the room is not. So for me, I have a very specific workspace, which I'm going to show you here in a second. And I have said, I am not going to work on the couch anymore or in my bed. I have a very small apartment, and I have said those are places where I just am not going to work. If you want to create real separation, then you have to get down to this granular level of specificity about what rooms and furniture and materials and tools you are going to use for work. It might seem like a small distinction, but this step is actually a really crucial part of creating that kind of separation. We tend to overlook this, and we want to use any space that's available to us as a workspace, but we're trying to prevent that from happening. So in addition to defining your physical workspace, define the places where you're going to keep your work materials. So keep your personal things and your work tools separate. Your work materials go in different drawers or folders and away from your personal belongings, and vice versa. The more that you sprawl out, the more you open yourself up to distractions that will pull you away from your work. So we want to get very specific about just defining spaces that are for work only. Step two in defining your workspace is to ask yourself, what rules am I going to implement that will help keep my workspace contained? So what do I mean by that? In an earlier webinar, we talked about the importance of morning and end of day routines and using rituals to create separation between work and home life. And this is actually a very similar concept. So you might create a rule at the end of the day that you're going to put all of your work materials away before you move on to your personal time. You might make a rule that you're not going to use your computer on your bed or on your living room couch. Or maybe you make a rule that certain work materials are designated for work only and they must stay in the workspace. I can tell you from experience that the first one that I just mentioned, putting away all of your work materials before you move on with the rest of your day, has been a really great way for me to create separation at the end of my day. Now, again, you might be thinking that some of this is really simple, but remember that what we're shooting for here is to create an area that's going to turn on your workday mindset when you enter that space, and then turn off once you leave the space. So creating the space is as much about setting up the physical boundaries as it is about triggering your brain to enter and exit work mode. So we have to just set up as many signals as we can that will help us tell our brain when it's work time and when it's not time to work, which again is going to help you have a better work day. So that's part one, defining your workspace. Part two is designing your workspace. So once you've defined what that area looks like, the next step is to design the space with an eye towards both function and also comfort. Now, I want to just say up front that I understand that we are all experiencing limitations here on how we can design our workspace based on space limitations, childcare, having to share the space with roommates or significant others. And so I'm very aware that that's a reality for many of you. So I'll just say that up front. Let me go ahead and share the results of the poll. So before we move on, let's just get a sense of the kind of challenges that we're facing right now. No surprise here. Number one is that there's not enough separation between the workspace and your home or personal spaces. Again, working in this really small space and trying to share, trying to break it up so that we're not having a lot of crossover between personal and work time. Really big challenge for people right now. So in this next part, we're going to actually speak to each of these, and I want to give you some ideas for how to overcome all of them. All right. As we go through these next few slides, I want you to remember that these concepts are not all or nothing. And I want to say that again because it's very important. As we go through these next few slides, remember that these concepts are not all or nothing. If you are able to even implement a few of these, it means that it's working and you're going to see the benefits. So if you can't do all of them, that's okay. Don't get too caught up in that. In terms of the concepts that I want to cover today, I want to give you 4 simple ones that you should consider as you are setting up your workspace. Every person is different in terms of their preferences and how they like to work and what they want their space to look like. But the 4 that I'm going to give you are supported by science and backed by research and other industry experts who study work environments for a living. So at the end of the day, you should always do whatever helps you show up at your best, but here are the 4 I want to offer you. Concept 1, focus and comfort. Concept 2, preventing sprawl. Concept 3 is lighting, and concept 4 is your visual environment. So the first concept is creating a workspace that has a section for focused work and a section that is designed more for comfort. So when I say focused work, your focused workspace might be a desk or a table where you keep your computer, and then your comfortable space is maybe a couch or a chair for reading or thinking or taking phone calls. The key here is having separate sections for focused work and then also a section for relaxed work. What we're shooting to do is really add some diversity into your workspace because we want to keep you from going long periods of time without moving around. We want to change it up a little bit. Why are we putting so much emphasis on this and leading with this one? Working from home is making us much more sedentary and we're not naturally moving around as much as we used to. So when possible, we want to create a space that will encourage us to get up and move around. We did this naturally in a lot of our older workspaces or previous workspaces, but now that we're at home in smaller spaces, we have to focus on how to diversify. So this is a picture of my personal workspace. I live in a 550 square foot apartment in San Francisco, and I can tell you that it was not designed for working from home. So I actually converted some of my kitchen space into a workspace because it was really the easiest and probably the only place where I could create as many boundaries as I could for my other personal spaces. So I'm actually working out of this space right now. You can see that I have a desk on the left-hand side there. That's my focused space where I do a lot more of my concentrated work. And then I have a cushion on the floor that's really more of like a comfortable spot where I sit and read sometimes. And I have it right back here right now. I love to switch back and forth between these 2 spaces. So the desk that I have is actually a standing desk. And so I actually spend about a third to a half of my day standing as well. And what I've done in my own workspace is just try to create that diversity that I just mentioned. And it helps to offer me some options throughout the day, even though I only have a small space to work with. One thing to remember here, we actually perform much better when we're comfortable. So just because you may not have had a comfortable space in a previous, more traditional workplace, that doesn't mean that you can't set one up for yourself. Now, there's a lot of science that says that having a comfortable place within your workspace to work can be really beneficial for you. And it's also one of the perks of working from home now. So concept 2 is preventing work sprawl by creating spaces and rituals for using them. So one of the main challenges of a home workspace is the potential for clutter and making what is already probably a small space feel even more. So if you want to prevent work sprawl, set up some areas where you're going to store your work things. Even if you work primarily online and with your computer like most of us do, and you don't have a lot of physical materials that you use day to day, you still want to dedicate a place where your work materials go so that you can take them out at the beginning of the day and then put them away at the end of the day. This is a very important ritual or a routine for you to develop. The act of taking things out and then storing them again is going to help signal the beginning and the end of your workday, which is going to go a long way in helping to create the kind of separation that you want between your workday and your personal time. Concept 3 has to do with lighting. So this might seem obvious, but again, at a time right now when focusing on our wellness is at a premium, having a well-lit workspace should be an even higher priority. So it turns out that access to natural light is a really major driver of our own wellness during a workday. So there's been some studies that have been done on this, and they have suggested that working in an environment with daylight can lead to a 50% drop in the incidence of eye strain, a 63% drop in the incidence of headaches, and a 56% reduction in drowsiness. So those are actually some pretty significant numbers. If you have access to natural light, do what you can to make sure that you're facing your workspace in the direction of that light. You can, of course, also use lamps to light the space, but really the key takeaway here is to focus on creating a well-lit environment. Fourth, and finally, is to curate your visual environment. So the things that are within your line of sight each day really play a huge factor in channeling your focus. So the goal here is to create a visual experience that's just going to limit distractions and then increase your focus and your level of comfort. So a few things that you might consider include being intentional about keeping a clear workspace and hiding things that you don't want to see or that aren't necessary. The more physical items you keep in your workspace, the more likely it is that they're just going to draw your attention. So limit the amount of work items that you keep out in the open and think about what you might be able to store and then take out later when you need them. Important one here, you might also consider adding plants or pictures of the outdoors to your workspace. So I have one little plant here. I've got another one off screen. I also have a couple of magazines that I keep open, and I just keep these in front of me and within my space, like pictures of spaces that I really enjoy looking at. So the reason that I do this is, again, a lot of science behind this. Some studies that have been done have said that having plants in your workspace can increase productivity by 15%. And also having pictures of the outdoors that you enjoy can also contribute to that as well, not to mention sort of the sense of calm that they can provide you day to day if you are having to work inside for long periods of time. So again, these are 4 really simple but effective concepts that are not my opinion. They're backed by science and expert research. And so if you're looking to really create or tweak your current environment, then you should hone in on the 4 of these. Number 1, creating a space that blends focus and comfort. Number 2, preventing sprawl. Number 3, natural lighting. And then number 4, curating your visual environment. Okay, final thoughts for today. Just a quick reminder that our next webinar is this coming Wednesday, May 20th, and we'll be covering how to implement a few simple concepts that will help you with your time and task management when working from home. There is a lot of information out there on time management and task management. So I just want to give you a couple of super simple concepts that I think will really help you make the most of your day right now. These have been tested over and over with the clients that we work with. So I'm going to give you some of the best recommendations that I have on those points. you're going to want to make sure you have that on your calendar for this coming Wednesday. Okay, let's take some time answering questions if there are any. Quick reminder about the podcast that we started a couple of weeks ago while we're waiting for any questions. It's called the Workday Mindset Podcast. Launched it a few months ago. Super short episodes, somewhere between 6 to 10 minutes each. And what we're talking about on that podcast are ways that you can navigate the day-to-day challenges that you face at work. So if you think about your workday, it's comprised of all sorts of mini challenges that we face moment to moment. And so in the podcast, I give you some really digestible tips on how to navigate those challenges and really help to set yourself up to show up at your best every day at work. So I would encourage you to take a listen to that, especially if you like a lot of the content that we're covering here on this webinar. Question: any products that you recommend to make your workspace feel more comfortable? A couple of big recommendations. Number one, I really honestly think that a standing desk is one of the best purchases that you can make for your home workspace. There's a lot of misinformation out there on standing desks. When you have a standing desk, it doesn't necessarily mean you have to stand all day. The idea behind a standing desk is that it allows you to create a movement-rich environment throughout the day. There is a lot of research that says that standing for short periods of time throughout the day is excellent for not only your body health, but your brain health, right? It keeps you moving, keeps the blood pumping. You don't have to stand forever. Going up and down throughout the day is really what's recommended. So I would say number one, look into a standing desk. You don't need to purchase a full desk in order to have a standing desk. There are lots of products that sit on top of flat surfaces that you can raise and lower. There's a company called Vari, V-A-R-I, that has some really great products. I would encourage you to check them out as a starting point. In terms of other specific products, like I said, I like to keep my workspace very clean. I have some plants, I have some pictures, and that's really it. I also have some drawers over here on the side, very simple stuff that I use. I would encourage you to keep it really simple. This is very much a less is more type of concept. Anything that you can put away or keep out of your line of sight, I think is really the way to go. Any other good questions? Okay, we will leave it there for today. Thanks again for joining, everyone. I would love to connect with you and have your help spreading the word about this series. Even though we only have 2 more episodes to go, we're gonna have lots of really good information in these last 2 episodes. If you could share this with a friend or give us a shout out on social media, that would be awesome. I would really appreciate it. Many of you have already done that, which has been fantastic. I appreciate you doing that. Again, next webinar is this coming Wednesday at the same time. We will see you then. Go have a great work day.